Hey guys, it's me, Kim. So I decided to do a little follow up on the video I just made about Taylor Swift coming out as a Democrat, of all things, because there were so many comments across platforms, which I was expecting. I've been at this a long time. I know generally what stuff is going to strike a nerve. So I wanted to do what I could to address some of the more common comments that I got because I just don't have a desire to go back and forth about my opinions on Facebook or Twitter anymore. So let's go. One, I have to say that I believe coalitions are possible. And I think that there are different kinds of coalitions to achieve different kinds of goals. I determine who I am going to work with based on if our ethics and our interests align. So I don't trust everybody in any group. When Black folks say, you need to forget about white people or non-Black people of color and only work with Black people, I'm like, no, that's not gonna work for me. Despite the fact that I love Black people and want to do work for Black people, I reject any kind of blanket statement like that because there are plenty of Black folks who are against my interests, who are sexist, who are homophobic, transphobic, regressive in all sorts of ways. I'm not with it. Just because you Black does not mean that we are trying to build the same thing. Gotta say it. I have to say it all the time. So the dozens of comments that I've gotten, particularly from cisgender Black men who say, do away with those white women, only work for Black people. I'm like, what are your politics? No, you tell me, because you could be just as gross to me as a white woman. And that's what y'all don't want to be honest about. You really could. So let's be real about that. I have no desire to work intimately with Tommy Sotomayor or Umar Johnson or Tariq Nasheed. I'll pass. And I've learned to vet white folks and non-Black people of color closely because, as everybody points out, they can be racist and classist, etc. I care when it comes to my feminist politics and my feminist organizing and work about your politics, not your identity. I'm not anti-identity politics. Obviously, I have to say this all the time because I feel like when I talk about this, that stuff can be misconstrued. I'm for identity politics as Black feminists like the Combahee River Collective outlined them in the mid-70s. I think we be getting it wrong in 2018 because people want to take shortcuts and avoid hard questions. I just think it's more complex than how we are often laying them out. Now, I have no desire to be in an intimate political relationship with Tariq Nasheed or Umar Johnson or Tommy Sotomayor or whoever. I mean, even a Charlemagne at this point, right? But if they are advocating a stance that I agree with, I'm not gonna be like, fuck you niggas. No. No, right? If one day these Black men who I think are gross and sexist, if they came out on a very staunch anti-rape, sexual assault, rape culture platform, which wouldn't happen, we know, but if they decided that they had an epiphany one day and that they were going to make that a central part of their work, I wouldn't be like, fuck you. I would let it rock. If you have the opportunity to convince your folks who are different from my folks to adopt a stance that I'm in agreement with, I'm not gonna come at you. That works for me. And I'm not gonna come at your neck for taking a position that I believe deeply in, that I think will better our entire community, that will help my folks, because I don't think that's a good strategy. I just don't think it's a good strategy to come at people's necks when they're doing stuff that serves your interest, as I said over and over again. Because when it comes to organizing, numbers matter. You don't have to be a radical Black feminist for me to see usefulness in building coalition or for us to get something we both want. And then once we get that thing, we can go our separate ways, and I'll go back to telling you how awful and harmful you are. That's life. You work with people on a project. The project is over, you go your separate ways. So now that that's out of the way, let's go through some of the comments and pushback that I got on that video. So I have to say, I am genuinely so baffled by people who claim that electoral politics do not matter. Federal and state legislative bodies have great influence on issues that I care about, like reproductive justice, reproductive freedom, abortion rights, mass incarceration, ending private prisons, securing the social safety net, voter suppression, climate change. So we need votes, period. One of the most ludicrous arguments I've seen is people in 2018 saying voting doesn't matter. In a Trump administration, for real. Are y'all crazy? So the first thing I'm going to trot out is the old auntie argument. That is, if voting doesn't matter, why is the right working so hard to make sure that poor people and immigrants and Black people can't vote? If it doesn't matter. If the composition of our elected officials has no impact on our society, then why? Why is partisan gerrymandering a thing? Because it matters. It matters who our judges are. It matters who the attorneys general and the district attorneys are. The priorities of the people in charge matters. I do believe, though, that Black people in particular who are disenchanted with electoral politics have a right to that. We've been failed time and again by people who were supposed to have our best interest at heart. I get it. I understand the cynicism. But it still matters. It still matters. I'm not going to resign myself to the idea that all hope is lost. There's nothing we can do. I think that's absolutely what they want. They want us to take our ball and go home and never show up. Those of us who have the ability to vote, they want us to not come out. I'm not going to do it. I'm not moving out of the United States. I have no desire to move out of the South, so we're going to have to do something to make some changes. Someone is going to be occupying these positions, whether we engage with the system or not. So disengaging, not an option. I do believe, though, that we should pair an electoral strategy that focuses on candidates that we like, who we're excited about, who are sufficiently progressive, who don't take money from the banks and corporations, that we should pair that with grassroots organizing. That makes sense to me. This is not an either or, it's a both and. But we wouldn't in 2018 be talking about Roe v. Wade is dead if voting didn't matter. That's all I can say about that. Now, let's move on to this idea about interest convergence. I kind of tried to touch on this earlier, but let's take it from another angle. So Derek Bell was a brilliant critical race theorist. He outlined in one of his papers that white people, white society, white institutions only back Black rights if there was something in it for them. I believe that. I'm not an Afro-pessimist. Maybe one day I'll get into why. But I do think that we're not ever going to be able to escape anti-Blackness. It's too embedded in our institutions. It's too firmly rooted in people's socialization, even Black folks. So when people are like, why do you care what white people do? They're racist. I'm like, yeah, duh. And men are sexist, and straight people are homophobic, and cisgender people are transphobic, etc., etc. I don't really care. I don't really care about that when I'm trying to get something done. I care if we can get to a point where our interests about this thing converge. One of the most common comments was, white women aren't being sincere. They're only jumping ship from Trump because they care about their own interests. They want to protect themselves. And I'm like, again, duh. Newsflash, most people act in what they believe to be their best interest. Most people, not just white people. Now, I know that because when I say, hey, you know what? Maybe we need to think of people less advantaged than us when we're making choices, I get called a mule. Black women call me a mule. When I say, you know what, maybe navigating this world is not just about what is going to make my life better. People don't like to hear that. So this idea that it's just the evil white women who only care about their self-interest, I'm like, you might be able to get that past somebody else, but you're not going to get that past me because I am deeply embedded in conversations with other Black folks about this stuff. We are all self-interested. So whether or not you're doing something to protect yourself is not really my concern. The issue is the self-interest of white people is often in conflict with what is in the best interest of. The issue is that the self-interest of white folks is often in direct conflict with what is in the best interests of my community. That's why the U.S. is going to be so fractured and toxic forever, because these interests are often clashing. But in the case of electoral politics, when it comes to, are we trying to get these people out? If different folks who might be able to influence different constituencies come on board to tell their people to do the thing that I want, that's ideal. Okay, next popular comment. People telling me Democrats aren't your friends. No shit. It's very strange to me that we understand what pragmatism is in most parts of our lives. When presented with options that are perhaps not ideal, we choose because choices have to be made. Now, how do we lose that ability to understand the value of pragmatism when it comes to electoral politics? The offices are going to be filled. The judges are going to be nominated. So I'm somebody who thinks that better is possible. I am not an optimist, but I always have hope. But even if you don't, you have to know that worse is possible. Any reading of history will tell you that it can get much, much worse. And if we're not being real about how much worse things can be, we're failing ourselves. We fail ourselves when we don't recognize that what happens in the political realm has effects that last generations. So you can sit on the sidelines, you could say none of this matters and you're not going to participate, but Donald Trump has placed more judges than anyone in history. These are people who will be on the bench in circuit courts and federal courts until they die. 35-year-olds who are going to be there for 50 years. It really frustrates me when people attempt to downplay what that means. Because it signals to me that you ain't doing your reading. You know, and I can't even really be having conversations with people who aren't learning the history. I can't. And finally, one of the most popular comments says, none of this matters. White people aren't going to change. Whatever. Okay, so my problem with conversations about electoral patterns is people often repeat what sounds good in a tweet or what they hear people say on CNN or what they think feels right, but it's not actually rooted in data or facts. I come to most of my positions via looking at data. I like that. The left still needs white votes to win elections in most places. The end. That's it. I've yet to see anybody counter that assertion with numbers. Do the research, look it up yourself. Who are the registered voters? Which populations are most likely to vote? Now, as I said in the video, the demographics of this country are changing. Half the people don't even vote. Half the people don't even vote in presidential elections. That needs to change. We can work to do that. But we need to be real about who is voting in 2018. When somebody commented, the last thing we need is more white people voting. I agree. But they're gonna. And of course I agree because white people don't tend to vote in the way that I need them to. They just don't. But they're going to show up. They're going to show up, and it is not a given that they're going to show up in 2018 the way that they showed up in 2016. This is just more misinformation. Like, y'all just be saying stuff because you think it's right. And I feel like some of these ideas are circulating, and they've been circulating for a couple of years. But the data does not bear that out. It's just not true that all white voters are so invested in protecting whiteness that they would never not vote Republican. That's not true. Like, what are y'all talking about? Empirically, it's not true. Empirically, that's not true. That's just a made-up thing that y'all be saying. People do change their votes. Despite this hyper-partisan era that we're in and the drastic polarization, political polarization that's happening, people do move votes. And right now, according to the polling data that we have, white women, educated white women, are a demographic that is shifting away from the GOP. I really don't care about what's in your heart. I don't need to know what's in your heart. I don't need to know all that to know that if you are voting for the D instead of the R, I'm with it. We don't even need to talk about it. Save the chit chat. Because my goal is to elect the D and not the R. We need different people in elected office. We need to reinstate some checks and balances. We need D's in governorships, D's running state legislatures. I don't know how many times I can say this. I have no clue what's going to happen next month. I think it is completely possible that the House doesn't turn blue. Completely possible. But I'm not content to do and say nothing. I'm not content to be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. No, I'm not. That's not how I live my life. You might be comfortable living your life like that. I am not. I think the stakes are too high. There's just too much. There's too much on the table right now. That's all I got. Thank you guys so much for listening to this. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you like what we do here, become a patron on our Patreon or make a one-time donation. Links for that stuff are in the description box. Buy some merch. Join me for Harriet email newsletter. Thanks, guys. Bye.